It's not I work or I don't work. There's a way to be with work and have it be balanced, sometimes more than others. Sometimes you're out of balance towards work. Sometimes you're out of balance towards family, but you can continue to walk that line and feel into what is right. All right, welcome back to the podcast. Today, I am coming to you with a solo episode as I continue to grow in this space of development, both real estate and personal. It's important to me to be able to use this platform to share how I'm staying inspired and what I'm using in my own practices. I think it's important to point out that growth and success goes well beyond hard work on the job, but also requires often harder inner work. I'm constantly finding that the inner work is what's really most beneficial as I go out and do the work that I do. It's important that we find meaning and purpose in all of it. And it's something that I can say I wake up every day and think about, and then actively pursue ways to go deeper on it. It's really something I recently spoke about with a friend who happens to own a ketamine clinic in New York. We're talking about doing some exciting stuff together here in Columbus. But while we were talking about this meaning of life and the importance of purpose, he reminded me of a book that I read a very long time ago. It's a book still that I have on my shelf that I was once encouraged to read back at a time that my wife Katie and I studied with a rabbi here in Columbus. There's a section of this book that I really want to read to you today. It stands out, and the book is The Power of Kabbalah by Rav Berg. And the passage is page 128. We came to this world to create positive change within ourselves and the world around us. Positive change will encounter resistance, conflict, and obstacles. We must embrace these difficult situations. A man can live in a town in a modest house with a white picket fence and a wonderful garden that he tends all day long. It's a good life, a tranquil life. At age 95, he passes on peacefully in his sleep. On the surface, it appears to be an ideal existence. But was this really his purpose on this planet? Was there any internal change in this man's life? Is he a different, more evolved spiritual being at age 95 than he was at 35 or 65? Some people live 70 years as if it were one day. Some people live one day as if it were 70 years. The white picket fence, early retirement, the simple lifestyle, all of this leads to complacency. These things can be weapons of our own opponent, who will instill complacency within us to prevent us from making inner change. Then, when it's too late, we realize that life was empty and without meaning. Even worse, some people go to their graves without realizing that their existence was empty. Yeah, this passage really struck me, and it was sort of serendipitous how this book was brought up and jumped out and really landed with me at a time where this is part of what, my own internal struggle is and has been, is really finding the balance between work and purpose and peace, and how much we should be productive versus how much we should just be, how money and attachments play into that. When I read this passage, it makes me think, I'm in a lot of entrepreneur groups where people are committed to multiple businesses and working really hard and making a lot of money. And it feels addictive. It feels like it's sort of running from the ability to just be still, to be with themselves, to be with their families, to be with their relationships, to be with what's running inside of them, maybe unconsciously that they don't want to deal with, maybe consciously. And that has sort of led me to want to work differently and maybe work less, possibly not even work at all. Yeah, I have a lot of really great mentors and coaches and people in my life that have continued to really preach the importance of having meaning and having purpose. Viktor Frankl talks about it in The Man's Search for Meaning, that the survivors were the ones that could find meaning even in the worst of circumstances. Dan Sullivan talks a lot about how retirement is the grim reaper, and that you need to be active and your mind needs to be moving, and you need to do that in the context of something that you're committed to in a 25-year stretch, that you love it that much, you do it for 25 years. Chet Scott calls it opus and refers to the Chateaubriand quote about the difference between labor and love, and that the art of living is to be able to work in a way that people can't tell if you're playing or working. There are many others that have shared similar sentiments. At Naval, who I love to follow, he really says retirement, the definition of retirement is being able to wake up and choose what you do every day. And it can be work, but you are choosing to do it. And you can choose not to do it if that's what you're feeling in that day, in that moment, if there's something more pressing, if you want to be with your family or take care of yourself or reach out and support a friend. That's what you get to do if you are truly free. Dan talks about the freedoms, the 4 freedoms of time, money, relationship, and purpose. And I think that's really what it's about. And this quote sort of reminds me, this page in this book sort of reminds me that it's not about just doing nothing, that the freedoms include the purpose. They include money, and they include protecting your time and your relationships, and that all of it is really important. It's not so black and white. That's something I've had to learn. It's not I work or I don't work. There's a way to be with work and have it be balanced, sometimes more than others. Sometimes, you're out of balance towards work. Sometimes you're out of balance towards family, but you can continue to walk that line and feel into what is right. And that's sort of where I've landed. And, I continue to refer to Michael Singer's Surrender Experiment. I read it annually. I've talked about it openly on the podcast. I love it. And so I want to just conclude with a line from Surrender Experiment that I think really sums it up for me, kind of how to be with this idea of work and purpose, passion, peace, and productivity, which is also something that my good friends Rob and Gino are working on. I'm excited to read their new manuscript on peace and productivity. But Michael Singer, Surrender Experiment, page 133, ironically, my lucky number, 33. It's do whatever is put in front of you with all your heart and soul without regard for personal results. Do the work as though it were given to you by the universe itself, because it was. So before I close out, I want to just update you on one more thing. I'm going to take a few weeks off to prepare for our next season of the podcast, which is going to kick off with an amazing interview with the one and only James Clear. Most of you know him from his New York Times bestseller, Atomic Habits. But on this podcast, and for the first time, he really opens up about much more than just habits, and really talks about life and the creation of life and the design of life. And I loved it. I know you will too. James is amazing. His book has been transformative for me and the 10 million plus people now that have purchased the book. So make sure you're subscribed so you receive all the notifications that we're back with that episode. And in the meantime, follow me on social media or stay tapped in on the newsletter. I'll share both links in the show notes. Until then, I wish you well and continued growth and healing on your own journey. Talk to you soon.